OpenAI just released a new GPT model 4.5. They claim it's their largest and most knowledgeable model yet, and while this might be true, it seems like it didn't really meet people's expectations, and even Sam Altman tweeted it's a giant expensive model that won't crush benchmarks. So let's dive straight into it. First of all, let's quickly cover what 4.5 actually is and where it stands among the other OpenAI models. Basically, we have three categories of models now: base models, chat models, and reasoning models. Base models are trained on trillions of tokens for several months, and they are the most expensive to get. During the pre-training phase, the model learns statistical patterns of language, it learns most of the world knowledge, and it develops general reasoning and representation capabilities. Once we have a strong base model, we can fine-tune it for chat, or we can use reinforcement learning to get a reasoning model. Now, as Karpathy explained in his recent post, each half a point in the version is roughly 10 times pre-training compute in terms of compute budget. And the question OpenAI is asking is, how much improvement do we get by training even larger models and spending more money on them? And asking this question makes sense because there has been a steady and reliable relationship between compute and performance in the past. This relationship is called neural scaling laws. It has been heavily researched, and for example, OpenAI shows in this 2020 paper that as we increase the compute budget for autoregressive transformers, their performance consistently improves following a power law across many different domains, like text-to-image or math. In another paper, they actually showed there are three main factors in performance scaling: the amount of compute, the dataset size, and the number of parameters, the model size. And for optimal performance, all three factors must be scaled up in tandem. So if these scaling laws hold and we interpret them correctly, they can allow us to predict with reasonable accuracy how a model will perform before actually training it, saving enormous amount of time and resources. After all, that's exactly what OpenAI showed in their previous technical report for GPT-4 2 years ago. They were able to predict the final training loss of GPT-4 by fitting a scaling law before having the model. And you can see that the prediction was spot on. But you can also see that these scaling laws show diminishing returns. So how far can we go with this? Will 10 times more compute bring enough performance to justify the cost of so much pre-training? Well, let's look at the benchmarks for GPT 4.5 that OpenAI just published. First, they compared 4.5 against 4.0 on a large number of everyday tasks, professional queries, and creative queries. And 4.5 was better across all categories. They also showed that 4.5 has better world knowledge and hallucinates less often than other OpenAI models. This is exactly what you would hope to get from more pre-training time and budget, and it's great to see such a big improvement here. And finally, these are the results for the standard benchmarks like MMLU. But let me show you one thing. This is a good way of presenting your model. This page is from DeepSeek and you can see all sorts of benchmarks for English, code, math, Chinese, and not just DeepSeek models but also compared to Qwen, Llama, Claude, and GPT. OpenAI gives us only these 6 results, and for some of them it's quite hard to understand how they compare to other non-OpenAI models. The multilingual MMLU seems to be a new translated version which they just created for this evaluation, so it's not comparable to other models. Sweelancer was published only about a week ago, so we have almost no data for it, and 2 of these benchmarks show numbers representing the best internal performance. What does that mean? It's not explained. But putting that aside, we can see that 4.5 beats 4.0 on all presented benchmarks, and on some like Amy, which is high school math competition problems, the difference is actually pretty substantial. I saw some people online being unhappy that it doesn't beat O3 Mini High, but is that really the goal here? It's not a reasoning model, and you can probably do reinforcement learning on 4.5 and get a new reasoning model that beats O3. But the problem, I guess, is that reasoning models are quite expensive. And a reasoning model built on GPT 4.5 would be extremely expensive, because look at this pricing model. 4.5 costs 30 times more than GPT 4.0 for input tokens and 15 times more for output tokens. And this is the real problem. Given how much bigger the model probably is and how much training resources they used, the improvement is probably not good enough. Apparently it has much better emotional intelligence than 4.0, but how do you really measure that? And I'm not sure if that's what people were asking for. If the whole thing with DeepSeek told us anything, is that people are interested in open source AI and cheaper, more efficient models. OpenAI is arguably going in the opposite direction with this model. Also, maybe that 4.5 is doing better on academic benchmarks, but when it comes to everyday tasks, the difference might not be as big as they are implying. Unfortunately, we don't have results from Chatbot Arena yet, which would be a perfect benchmark for this model. But you know what? Karpathy made a post yesterday where he asked people to choose between 5 sets of outputs, where one was randomly from 4.5 and one from 4.0. And people ended up choosing 4.0 in 4 out of 5 cases. Yeah, that is a bit awkward. Well, maybe we can learn more from this 30-page system card OpenAI published. Although it doesn't provide any insights into the architecture or training data, it offers some interesting evaluations. And the part that stood out to me was actually on the last page, and it's about multilingual capabilities. I find this important because in the field the focus is largely on English and code, while other languages are not typically well represented in the training data. Although the system card doesn't tell us exactly how much data from different languages they used, we do get to see 4.5's performance results for MMLU, a dataset of about 16,000 multiple choice questions covering a large number of different subjects. They actually use professional human translators to translate the original MMLU English dataset into all these languages. And it's actually quite nice because previously it was done automatically by Azure Translate. So this should make the results much more reliable. Now the results show that 4.5 is better than 4.0 across all these 14 languages. But it's also worse than 0.1 on every single language. So it's a step forward, but there is still a huge gap between English and languages like Swahili and Yoruba. Also, again, I don't understand why they reported the results like this. Why not include O3? Or how about testing competitor models like Claude or Gemini? Alright, so what model should we use? Should we all be using 4.5 now? As a Plus user, I can see 7 model options now. If I were a Pro user, I would also see 2 more models, 4.5 because it's only available for Pro users right now, and O1 Pro. So that's 9 models in total. Based on the benchmarks and what they've said, GPT-4.5 is the best model for everyday tasks and creative or professional queries. So can we just forget about 4.0? Well, not really, because OpenAI also says that 4.5 is a very large and compute-intensive model and that it's not a replacement for GPT-4.0. We might find it slower with usage limits and it might be even discontinued in the future. So maybe we should reserve 4.5 for more difficult tasks. Unless they are too complex, of course, in which case we should use reasoning models. The best one is O1 Pro, which outperforms O3 Mini High, which beats O1, which sometimes beats O3 Mini. But we shouldn't use O1 and O3 if we want factually correct answers, as both score much lower than 4.5 on factuality, and they also hallucinate more often than 4.5, unless you want answers in other languages where O1 scores higher than 4.0 and 4.5. Sounds like we'll soon need another AI to tell us what AI to use. In comparison, I find the Claude interface much more intuitive. I pick my model, then decide whether I want to give it more time to think, and lastly, simply choose the output style. For example, I want a short answer, so I choose concise. The good thing is that Sam Altman mentioned this problem in one of his recent tweets, and it seems that hopefully GPT-5 might present a unified solution, where we won't have to choose between non-reasoning and reasoning models. Then again, I think that they could just replicate what Claude is doing. Overall, I'm glad they published the model, even though it's clearly not as good as they initially planned and expected. And it's interesting to see where this scaling is getting us. However, it would be so much more beneficial as open source research. Having full access to the model, knowing the details like the model size, parameters, and training data would help us to better understand the scaling laws and the implications of scaling, and could help us make more efficient models in the future. Now we just have an expensive closed source model that is slightly better than what we had before. So that's all for today. Please consider subscribing if you liked the video, and thank you for watching.